Lisa, take it away.
Well, thank you, Kelsey. So the plan tonight is to talk about the Kansas 4-H Horse Show rulebook. I was part of the committee that did the last revision. And so, I can probably provide a little bit of perspective and maybe, kind of know some of the history behind why some decisions were made and why some rules exist. So anyway, if you have questions about those sorts of things, like Kelsey said, we'll have some time for questions. I'd be happy to answer those. The 4-H horse rulebook was most recently revised in the spring of 2020. Again, I was part of that process, but it's probably going to be revised again soon. And it's really important when someone's reviewing the rulebook to make sure they've got the most recent, because things do change, and you would hate to, to read the rulebook and think you're all prepared and you're up on the rules and find out that actually what you read is no longer the case. So make sure you've got the most recent version. You can get those online. The website is here. And as well, you should be able to obtain those through your local extension office. And then of course, step 2 is to read the rule book. Today, I'm just going to go over some highlights, some of the big things. And, I'm going to try to cover a lot of material in a fairly short period of time. So we're not going to do a real deep or thorough dive. And so, I certainly encourage everybody, particularly for the events that you intend to participate in, to read it, because there's a lot more detail in there than what we're going to hit on tonight. So some of the important points: one, the identification horse ID papers must be submitted by May 1. Considering this is May 16th, hopefully everybody has that done. And another requirement, if you're going to compete at the district or state shows, is that 4-Hers must complete the level 1 exam. Districts and state shows are coming up this summer. So if there's anyone who would like to do that for the first time and has not taken the level 1 exam, again, there's more detail in the rule book, but I would encourage you to get that taken care of here pretty shortly, so you'll be eligible to compete at the district show. 4-Hers can use a family-owned horse, and the rule book has some pretty extensive language about what constitutes family. It can be mom, dad, stepmom, stepdad, brother, sister, the list goes on. So if there's someone in your family that has a horse that you think might work, consult the rule book to see if that would work or would qualify as a family-owned horse. If not, you are allowed to lease a horse if you don't have a family-owned horse. Or if you do, you can lease one additional horse. And the thought process behind that was, maybe you're a rodeo family and you've got horses for timed events, but maybe you've got a kid who wants to try the English classes. And maybe you want to lease a horse to try that, rather than making the commitment to purchase a horse. And so that's why we decided, if someone had a family-owned horse, that it would be, acceptable if they also leased one additional horse. When you go to a horse show and you go to enter classes, some classes may be divided on horse age. We use a universal birthday to January 1st for horses. So, if your horse was born in 2012, it really doesn't matter what day in 2012 the horse was born on. We take our current year, 2022, minus the year the horse was born, which was 2012, and we would say the horse is 10. It doesn't matter if he was born in May or July, he's 10. Now, 4-Hers, we're going to use their birthday or their age as of December 31st of the current 4-H year. So if a kid is 13 right now, and they start the show season competing as a 13-year-old and they turn 14 in July, they don't have to move up to that next age group until next summer, next show season. They can compete at that same age group throughout the year. Once a 4-H'er is at a show, family can help with the horses. They can help with grooming. They can help tack it up. They can help lunge it. But nobody's supposed to ride the horse other than the 4-H'er. We understand that things are crazy at a horse show, and the kids might be, putting their show clothes on, and you just need some help to be able to get to the gate on time. That's A-okay. But the 4-H'er is expected to be the one riding the horse and doing that sort of work. Good sportsmanship with any 4-H activity is expected. Something that's in the rulebook that I think sometimes people don't realize, if you enter the arena, then you need to stay there until the class is over. Sometimes you'll see a kid come in and they turn around and leave. Maybe they forgot to put their spurs on. So they're heading back out to go get their spurs, and then they think they're going to come back in. And that actually constitutes a disqualification. So make sure once you get in the arena, you have everything you need. And if you don't have your spurs, you probably would be better off just riding the class without your spurs as opposed to leaving the arena. If you have questions, you can ask the show manager, your extension agent, someone working at the show. But 4-Hers are discouraged from approaching the judge and talking to the judge until after the show is over. That judge, we need to kind of keep the show going, and they've got a task ahead of them, and we don't really want to distract them from that, and we don't want to create issues for the judge. But if you want feedback from the judge, you can certainly seek that at the end of the day, but you should bring a show manager or someone with you when you approach the judge. And if you think there's a rule violation, the process for declaring that is outlined in the rule book as well. There are some rules that are just general that relate largely to safety and humane treatment of animals. We don't show stallions, just mares and geldings. Equipment needs to be humane and good working condition. We can't tie 4-Hers to the saddle. Now, something I think, back in maybe the 70s, it was a thing in horsemanship for the judge to ask exhibitors to change horses. We don't do that anymore. And in fact, it's not allowed. So you don't have to worry, if you're comfortable with your horse, you don't have to worry that the judge is going to ask you to ride somebody else's horse. In fact, the judge can't even ask you to dismount unless they want to see the bit. And if they do that, it would be at the end of the class and you would not be required to get back on. The exception to that would be in trail if we do it in ground tie, but that's to work a specific obstacle. Blood on the horse, if it's evident, if it's around the bit or the spurs or across the nose, if you've got a bozal, you get disqualified for that. If your horse gets loose or is particularly disruptive, you can be excused. Kansas 4-H does not require ASTM, SCI approved helmets, but they are strongly encouraged. Some states have gone to requiring them for everybody. In Kansas, they're only required in hunter hack where the exhibitor is jumping fences, but they are strongly encouraged in all classes. Of course, horses need to be treated humanely anytime we're at a 4-H event. At the district shows, the award systems are outlined in the 4-H rulebook. At the district shows, we use the Danish system where a superior performance gets purple, above average, meets all the requirements of the class, gets a blue, a red, maybe we have a few problems, some things to work on. A white probably got disqualified, and a green would be something like lameness or getting bucked off. So that's kind of explained, but then at the state fair, we use a different system. We use the American system, and every class is just placed 1st through 10th place. You have to be at least 9 to compete in a 9 4-H age to compete at a district show or the state fair. You can compete in your own district plus one more. This was one of the changes that went into the most recent rule book. It used to be you had to do just your district. You didn't have any other options. But now, if you have a conflict with that date or you just had a bad day and you want to go try somewhere else, you can do that. Horse substitutions are allowed at the district show. So if you enter a horse for your district show and it gets hurt, you can bring another horse and you can do a substitution at the district show. You cannot, however, substitute at the state fair. So substitutions fine at district, but once you get past district and you're going on to state fair, you have to use the horse on which you qualified. And to qualify, you have to get a blue or purple in that class at the district show. Okay, so I'm going to kind of walk through. I'm not going to touch on every event or every class that's in the rule book. just because in all the years I've been involved in 4-H, there are some classes that we just don't see many entries in. And so I'm going to spend my time talking about the classes that tend to have more numbers. I'm going to start with classes that have an English or a Western option. So the first one's going to be showmanship. And one addition to the rule book that was not there previously is that now for each event, there's a little bit of information about the class procedure. So if you're new to 4-H and you think you might want to try some new things, but you're reading about hunter under saddle and you see what it's judged on, but you don't know how the class works, we've tried to include that information. So someone new to the project will at least have an idea of what's going to be expected of them when they get to the show. So in showmanship, we've got individual patterns, and the judge is going to judge the 4-H'er. And they're, we're not really judging the horse, but the condition, cleanliness, and grooming of the horse reflects the effort of the 4-H'er. And so all of that goes into this. In showmanship, exhibitors can wear English or Western attire. If you're dressed in Western attire, you've got to use a halter and a lead shank. That lead shank can have a chain or not. If you're wearing English attire, you can use a halter or a bridle. And English exhibitors, as shown in the bottom picture down here, they can use a whip. The whip should not touch the horse, but you can use it, to get his ears up and get his attention. I think that as you go through these classes and you go through the rule book, it's important to pay attention, especially to equipment, because I've judged so many horse shows where someone comes in the arena with illegal equipment. You have to disqualify them. The rule book says it's a disqualification, but it's something that could have been so easily avoided. This would be an example. In showmanship, you can have a chain under the horse's chin, but you cannot have it over the nose. And if you just know that going in, you don't put it over the nose, you avoid getting disqualified. So I think paying attention to things like that can really help you excel and maybe lessen the amount of frustration you might feel at your first horse show. I also think it's really important, as you get more advanced in showing your horse, you're going to probably want to dig a little deeper into the scoring systems, but especially in the beginning, knowing what constitutes a disqualification or what's a major fault, I think those are things to focus on in the beginning. If this is a major fault or it's a DQ, let's not do that. In judging shows, I see a lot of kids who are having troubles getting their horse set up, and they'll grab that lead shank with 2 hands. Well, the rule book's pretty clear, that's a DQ. Maybe they touch the horse, they push on his shoulder, or they're trying to get him to pivot and they're poking him in the shoulder. That's a DQ, and so if you know this going into it, you can avoid a lot of these sorts of penalties. One of them here is holding the chain. It would be easy enough to just slide your hand down and again, avoid that penalty. In halter, the judging criteria is different. We're judging the horse's conformation. We're looking at how he's built. How long is his neck? What is the slope of his shoulder? How straight are his legs? So here the horse's behavior is not as important. The class procedure. So in showmanship, we do individual patterns, but the judge can make those patterns up. In halter, the procedure is much more consistent. You walk to the judge, you trot on by, you generally will trot a left turn, and then you'll go line up head to tail. Equipment would be the same as showmanship. Okay, the last class that's got an English or Western option is trail. 99% of the time, you'll see kids do this in Western attire, but they can do English. The rules allow for that. In trail, we're going to have basically an obstacle course for the horse. You're going to come in one at a time. You're going to work the patterns, and the judge is going to judge the horse as you work these obstacles. Each maneuver is scored separately and individually. So you could completely demolish one maneuver, but if you do really, really well on all the others, you still might come out okay. So they're judged separately, and then the points are added together. And again, the scoring system is covered in much more detail in the rule book. But if you're going to really focus on something and you're getting started, you should know what constitutes a DQ so you can avoid those penalties. More than one finger between the reins if you've got a curb bit. That'll get you disqualified. Going off pattern, a third refusal, that's probably the most common one that I would see. A horse is scared of something, he's scared of the bridge. And the rider tries and tries and tries again, and he just won't go over it. And that's a DQ. Major penalties, they're listed here. A refusal, your first refusal is a major penalty, your second refusal is a major penalty, and then a third refusal gets you disqualified. Things like letting go of the gate, and that's going to be a pretty big penalty. Something that a lot of people don't realize, using your hand to instill praise. In other words, petting your horse is a pretty big penalty. So if he's doing good and you want to pet him, that's great, but wait until the class is over. Otherwise, you'll actually be penalized for that. If you read the rule book, it gives you the mandatory obstacles. The gate is a mandatory obstacle. You're going to have to do it. There's no way around it. So when you're home practicing, you probably should make sure you can work the gate. You would hate to have three refusals at the gate and get disqualified, or drop the gate or let go of it and get a major penalty. It's going to be there. You can't hope for a trail pattern without a gate, because it's not going to happen. Read your rule book, know what's mandatory, and practice it. Other things, the bridge, they may or may not have a bridge, but the gate, it's going to be there. For logs, if you read the rule book, it tells you what the distances are going to be, if they're a walkover or a trot over or a lope over. So when you're setting these up at home to practice, you know exactly how far apart you should set these, and you can set them just like they're going to be at the show in order to practice them. Classes that are strictly Western are addressed next in the rule book. Starts with attire, clothing and equipment. Have to have a hat or the ASTM helmet, long sleeve shirt, boots with a heel, and some sorts of pants. You can dress it up with a tie or scarf, vest, jacket. There's a lot of things you can do to kind of dress it up if you want to. You have to have a Western saddle and a bridle. There's a lot of information in the rule book about what constitutes a legal bit and what kinds of reins have to be used with that bit. And so, you want to make sure that what you're using there is legal. We can do a whole webinar about that. And so, I'm just going to direct you to the rule book to read that information. There are some things that are optional: breast collar, back cinch, leg wraps. You see leg wrap or boots on this horse here. Those are only allowed in reining and horsemanship. So you can't use those in something like Western pleasure. Okay. There are some things that are prohibited. I think some to pay particular attention to would be gag bits. I see a fair number of gag bits, roping reins, and tie downs. But those are allowed in the speed events, but not in the judged events. So, if someone comes in with a, tie down like this horse has, that's a DQ, and that would have been easily avoided by just, reading the rule book and making sure that you have legal equipment. Okay, horsemanship. Here we're judging the rider. We're going to look at the rider's position, how they use their aids, and how well they can guide that horse through a pattern. So they're going to do individual patterns. When I was in 4-H, you did a pattern and rail work. Now rail work is optional, and most shows actually the judges are placing horsemanship based on a pattern alone. The rule book specifies what kinds of maneuvers can be in the pattern. The judge will make the pattern, but it has to come from this set of maneuvers. So these are the things to practice at home. And I think some 4-Hers don't realize how important body position is. In horsemanship, we want to see a straight line from that rider's ear through the shoulder, the hip, and the heel. That's someone who's balanced, and no matter which direction the horse goes, they should be able to kind of stay with them. In the middle picture here, that rider is leaning forward. And it's going to be very easy. If that horse comes to an abrupt halt, she's going to tip forward and may come off. You know, in this picture here on the left-hand side, she's sitting too far back. She's got her feet too far out in front of her. She's not going to be very effective in this position either. So, you know, I think a lot of people get pretty focused on the pattern and they forget that this is part of the criteria as well. Western pleasure has a completely different focus. Sometimes I think people expect that if someone does well in horsemanship, they will do well in Western pleasure also. But that's not necessarily the case because the judging criteria are pretty different. Here we're looking at the horse. We're judging how he moves, his manners, his attitude. And, you know, it honestly doesn't really matter what the rider's position looks like. Here we're focused on the horse. In this class, we're going to do rail work. We're going to walk, jog, and lope both directions of the arena, and then everybody will be asked to back. The faults are outlined in the rule book. You know, all these things would be considered a fault. Touching the horse again, you know, don't cut your horse. The rule book describes what desirable movement looks like, how the horse should carry their head. And there are some tips in there as well. You know, when the judge asks you to reverse, you should go to the inside of the arena rather than turning your horse towards the fence. The judge can ask you to reverse at a walk or a jog, and the judge can ask for an extension of the walk and jog. So those are things to practice at home. In reining, we're going to ask the 4-Hers to do individual patterns, but this time the judge does not design the pattern. There are specific patterns in the rule book that the judge can pick from. And they're going to score the horse and rider on how easily the horse is maneuvered through that particular pattern. Again, it's important to know what sorts of things will get you disqualified and what are major penalties. Going off pattern, you know, for all of our classes, going off pattern is pretty much a DQ. But something a lot of people are not aware of, if your horse backs more than 2 strides where a back is not called for. So maybe you're supposed to run to the center and then spin to the left. And your horse runs to the center and he's anticipating the spin and he takes a couple steps backwards, that could be a DQ. So it's important to know these sorts of things. And, you know, if you have troubles with your lope departures, if he jogs half that circle before he picks up a lope, that's a DQ. Again, petting your horse would be a DQ. So, you know, I think in order to optimize your chances of success, it's important to kind of know what sorts of things will really be penalized. The rule book has working ranch horse classes broken out separately. So there are a few, the equipment is basically the same. A lot of it's the same as your Western classes, but there are a few differences. In the ranch classes, we want to see the horses ridden on light contact. We don't want to see a real loose rein. Manners, responsiveness, and movement are still important. But one big difference is at the extended trot and the ranch horse classes, exhibitors can stand up, as shown in this picture here, and they can hold on to the saddle horn. In every other class, grabbing the saddle horn is penalized, but not in the ranch horse classes. And in fact, when they're trotting, when they're doing the extended trot, the riders also have the option to post if they would like to. Again, the equipment is pretty similar to the Western classes. There are a few differences. So in, you know, horsemanship and pleasure, braided manes or banded manes are pretty standard. That's actually discouraged in the ranch horse classes. Hoof polish is also discouraged. And roping reins, tie downs, those are also not allowed in the ranch horse classes. In the ranch horse rail, I mean, this is kind of Western pleasure ranch horse style. We're going to want to see the horse go forward a little bit more, ridden on a little more contact, but we're still judging quality of movement, attitude, and mannerisms. We're going to do rail work both directions, but you will be asked to do an extended trot and an extended lope. And so if the 4-H'er is not comfortable doing an extended lope in a big group, you know, maybe this is a class to not enter until they develop that level of comfort. Ranch horse pattern, going to do a pattern, and it should simulate things that you would have to do on a ranch. So you see in this picture here, you know, the horse is crossing these logs. Typically, you're not going to see brightly painted colored logs in a ranch horse class. They're going to look more like natural wood. But there are patterns specified in the rule book, again, that the judge can select from. Major penalties are really the same as they are for most of our other classes. Blatant disobediences or being off pattern. But you can see here in the picture, she's holding the saddle horn. That is something that would be a major penalty in other classes, but it's acceptable in ranch horse classes. Ranch horse trail is really not that different than a regular trail class. The nature of the obstacles is a little bit different. Instead of brightly painted logs, they will look like natural wood. You might have to rope a dummy, so the nature of the obstacles is a little bit different, but those are outlined in the rule book, so you know what sorts of things to practice at home. If you can't finish an obstacle, a judge can ask you to move on to the next one, or they can dismiss you from the arena. Again, your mandatory obstacles are basically the same as they are in regular trail. You will work a gate, you will have to cross some logs, and you will have a backing obstacle. Your 0 score and 5-point penalties are really pretty much the same as they are in regular trail. On the English side of things, our English clothing is obviously going to be a little bit different. Breeches or jodhpurs, you got to have your boots, your shirt, you're going to wear a coat. The helmet is required. It doesn't have to be ASTM approved unless you're going over fences, and then some sort of tie or choker. Have to have a hunt or forward type seat. Dressage saddle doesn't work. The open-toed steel stirrup, legal bit, bridle, noseband, girth, saddle pad, pretty standard. There are things that are optional: gloves, hunting breastplate, stirrup treads. You are allowed to have a crop in the English classes, whereas you are not in the horsemanship and Western pleasure. But things that are prohibited to take note of: slip-on spurs are not allowed, nor are any type of martingale, or shown in this picture here, like a figure 8 noseband. These nosebands that go down below the bit would not be allowed. Hunter under saddle, this is the equivalent to Western pleasure. We're going to do rail work both directions, walk, track, canter, and we're going to judge the horse. We're going to judge the way it moves, its manners, its attitude. And of course, major faults are outlined in the rule book. Wrong lead, breaking gait, excessively slow or fast, those sorts of things would be considered faults. Whereas hunt seat equitation would be more like horsemanship, or for judging the rider. They're going to do individual patterns that the judge has determined, and we're going to judge that rider. We're going to judge how well they execute the pattern and what their position looks like. We still want that ear, shoulder, hip, and heel to be aligned in a straight line. We want to see those heels down. When I'm judging horsemanship, one of the most common position problems that I see is riders, they don't keep their heel down and they let their legs start swinging forward and backwards. The rule book defines what components can be in those patterns. So again, it's good to know what those are and to practice those at home. And then the timed events, there are some things, we have a lot of junior rodeos in Kansas, and a lot of kids that compete in them, but there are some differences in the rules. So if you're going to compete in a 4-H show, some of these are pretty important to be aware of. But as far as clothing goes, you've got to have shirt, pants. The helmet is optional, as is the hat. So in our other Western classes, a hat is required. It's not required in the timed events. And if you do choose to wear a hat, it is really important to have that thing glued to your head, because if it comes off, 2 seconds will be added to your time. And that can be pretty costly. So either don't wear it or make sure it is firmly attached to your head. In the timed events, roping reins, tie downs, bats, those sorts of things are allowed. Mechanical hackmore is allowed. You still cannot have tapaderos or metal under the horse's chin, like a quick stop. Those are not allowed. Okay, so the timed events, it's fastest person wins, but the judge will be asked to stay for the timed events. And these are the sorts of things the judge is going to be watching for. And they could disqualify you if you can't get your horse through the gate in a timely and safe manner. You also, and this is different than some of your rodeos, you can't just come running through the gate and start your pattern. You have to, you're supposed to hesitate, wait until the gate is closed, and then start running. And I've seen people disqualified for that. And a couple of years ago at the North Central District, I saw someone get disqualified in the barrels because her mom led her into the arena, and that's also not allowed. Like most places, the start line and finish line would be the same. And if there's a tie, then there's a rerun procedure outlined in the rule book. The judge is going to be watching for misuse of the hand, bat, spurs, or reins, hitting the horse in front of the shoulder, not allowed, things like that. And those are described in the rule book, as well as the ribbon groupings. The rule book goes into some detail about what should constitute a purple, a blue, or red, a white, or a green. Fastest time wins. One horse in the arena at a time, doing individual patterns. If you knock over a barrel, it's a 5-second penalty. If you knock over 2 barrels, you're going to get a no time. Something that's different in 4-H versus some other places. In 4-H, you're not allowed to touch the barrel. If it starts to fall over, you can't reach down and grab it and set it back up. Like most places, if you recross the timeline, if you're going around that first barrel and your turn's really, really wide and your horse comes back towards the gate and you recross that timeline, that would be a DQ as well. Flags, you run down, you grab your flag, you run back. If you drop the flag, you don't get the flag, that's a no time. A DQ would be knocking the barrel over, using the flag as a whip, or crossing the timeline, being off pattern. Poles are essentially the same as barrels. A knockdown is 5 seconds, 2 knockdowns is a no time. Touching the pole with the hand, recrossing the timeline, or going off pattern would all be considered DQs. So I think that the rule book can be used as a valuable tool to learn, how does the class work? What's the judge looking for? What kind of equipment and attire is allowed? What sorts of maneuvers should I be practicing at home? Once I get to the show, what are the penalties? What sorts of things should I make sure I don't do? So I think that the rule book can really help you in preparing for a show. And then once you get to the show, understanding what you can and can't do, and maybe having a better understanding of why the judge placed the class the way he or she did. So I think it's a really valuable tool. Now, I do know for some people new to the project, there may be some terminology and some things that are maybe a little bit confusing. And so if that's the case, by all means, contact your county agent, your local horse leader, someone else in the project who's been in the project for a longer period of time, or the state 4-H office. And there's a lot of people that are here to help. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, right now I don't see any questions in the chat, but I want to give everyone an opportunity to ask questions. So if you've got some, go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll wait here just a couple minutes. As we wait, as a reminder, we are recording this tonight. So if you hopped on a little late, or if you need to go back and have some things clarified for you, these will be posted. All of these videos are posted on the Kansas 4-H website. And then if you go to projects and then animal science and then horse, that will get you to the appropriate link. We also do ask that you complete the survey at the completion of watching the videos. That just helps us to have a better idea of what we can do to better serve our 4-Hers. We are looking forward to continuing our series, and right now our equine webinar series has really been focused on very project specific and show specific topics. We have covered the Danish ribbon grouping system. We have also covered the level testing system as well, and those are all in preparation to get you ready for your district horse shows, if that's something that you choose to do. These will also be helpful to you as far as your county fair process, but we will be adding additional equine webinars that will focus on horse care and horse industry and horse health. So be sure to be on the lookout for those. And Teresa, at this time, we still don't have any questions. So I think we're going to honor everyone's time. And once again, we'd like to thank Teresa Douthit again for joining us this evening. She is in the Department of Animal Science on campus at Kansas State University, and we appreciate her time this evening. And thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next month.